Well, we're on a different continent for this one, and Morocco was, if possible, even more hectic, exotic and diverse than I expected. Just keep in mind that these were all filmed on the same day, and those two were only about an hour apart. It's easily one of the most exhilarating trips we've taken so far, but we are getting ahead of ourselves. I'd actually filmed myself taking my first ever steps onto African soil. African asphalt. But the footage turned out a lot less interesting as an intro than I'd hoped. It might have helped if I'd picked some less boring shoes. With some careful spawn sniping on EasyJet flight release day, we'd managed to get some return flights for just over £50 per person per flight. This was for a weekend in mid-November, and that's pretty low as Morocco flights go, partly because we're flying out in term time. Now, historically, Morocco has one of the closest ties to Europe, both from its proximity and also historical connections to both Spain and also from French colonialism. But when I was researching the trip, there was a pretty hefty stack of do's and don'ts being thrown around that had us a little apprehensive. A very adamant don't drink the water, and this isn't like the don't drink the water that your parents told you from their visit to Valencia like 40 years ago. You've got to be constantly vigilant for pickpockets, and don't let anyone show you the way somewhere or they might lead you down a back alley and demand money. No public displays of affection, conservative clothing for men and women, no shoulders on show, you'll have to barter for everything, including life-saving medication at the hospital. The food will give you food poisoning, don't gesture with your left hand, don't try and trade scrap with the Jawas, don't attempt to sign up for a subscription with Hulu, don't attempt to commune with the ancient Cthulhu, do not attempt to view the feature film Zulu on Hulu with Cthulhu. The advice had painted such a paranoid picture of Marrakech, it made Mos Eisley sound like Mayfair by comparison. Look, I'm all for being well-researched and prepared, but look, I'm just going to skip ahead and spoil the ending moment. Morocco was so much less threatening than the sum of everyone's collective advice. Bear in mind that the stories of I went to Marrakech and had a lovely time and no trouble at all are going to get a lot less traffic than I went to Morocco and I got Look, absolutely do exercise some caution, and yeah, be aware of some of the things to look out for, but speaking as someone who went out on hyper alert, I soon realised that I was far more apprehensive than I needed to be. We did go as a group of 4, which is a good call. It just makes you feel a lot more confident and less of a target, so yeah, just take some friends. Okay, so early flight from a chilly and cloudy Gatwick. We soared above the clouds and landed in a chilly and cloudy Marrakech. Yeah, November, pretty cold, as it turns out. It only got up to about 18 degrees in the middle of the day, even in full sunshine, and down to about 3 degrees in the early morning. Now, I'm taking that as a net positive. I mean, seriously, just ask anyone in the UK on a sunny day anywhere above like 22 degrees, and you'll hear a chorus of disapproval about how oppressive the is. So, we got to see all the beautiful things in Morocco under generally glorious sunshine, and all the while still wearing a jumper. It's perfect. However, when we first landed, it was pretty cloudy. So, despite the fact that North Africa looks like one long yellow stripe from space, this here is not the Sahara Desert. I know from above it probably looks like it, but this is not a land just covered in sand. I mean, at least not this part of it. Sure, it's not exactly the home counties either, and there's a lot of palm trees, but for the most part, it's more of like a reddish dust, a kind of light and rather dry ochre soil. I mainly raise this because people hoping for a journey into the actual Sahara are usually disappointed to find out you have to travel for several hours further south to get into the desert proper. There were more steps than you'd normally expect to exit the airport, but at length we were out the door. I was very aware of the limited time we had. In fact, pretty much exactly 48 hours gate to gate. You know what, much as this is going to be nothing but time consuming in the edit, we are putting this countdown clock in the top right. So I'd suggested to my friends that we ignore the aggro of negotiating a taxi that may or may not be ripping us off, and we walked. Numerous taxi drivers honked as they passed us and tried to pick us up. They seemed genuinely baffled that we would actually walk, and despite there being this lovely wide pavement all the way to the airport, I have scarcely ever seen such an empty walkway. Clearly this is not commonly done. Oh, and last episode, we failed to get a low-angle shot of any Bosnia flags. As far as Morocco flags go, well, it looks like someone accidentally typed a couple of extra zeros on their last flags order. They are exploding out of just about everywhere. You'll be driving down a highway and it's all like Morocco, 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 just in case you're about to forget which country you were in. After about 20 minutes, we'd walked around the perimeter of the airport, and the plan was to go through this park, which takes you pretty much right to the city centre. I mean, I say park, it's basically a plantation of olive trees. Orchard of olive trees? Grove of... whatever the collective noun for lines of olive trees is. You can go through, there's a path, and it was a nice break from the petrol fumes of the main road. And just as we were getting close, we heard the first call to prayer floating over the sound of distant traffic. Thing is, Marrakech is not actually all that huge. We'd taken about 40 minutes, tops, to get from the airport. It's encircled by a ring road, which is pretty busy and, well, necessary, as inside the old city it quickly shrinks down into tight capillaries that are near impassable for cars. So yeah, if Marrakech was this dense and the footprint of, say, London, we'd be really screwed. As it is, you can cross the main old city in about 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the amount of people out and about. Even though there are some rectangular suburbs that protrude outwards from this central hub, the scrub ground of the surrounding countryside encroaches right up to the ring road. These are the ramparts of Marrakech. They date back to the early years of the city in the 1100s, but they've been constantly upkept and repaired/replaced by successive generations. As we went through the gate close to the Koutalbia Mosque, on the left there is Guiliz, which I guess would be the new town. A lot of the cool restaurants are there, but our Airbnb was on the other side of town, and check the clock, we're here for the Marrakech vibe, so we are all about that old city. Now, the Koutalbia Mosque is probably one of the most significant landmarks in Marrakech. It's the go-to icon of the city. It was built by the Almohads on the site of an old Almoravid palace, as a non-too-subtle diss. It's spectacular to see in person, and its architecture would go on to inspire other mosque construction, not just across Morocco, but also in the south of Spain. Going all the way back to our first episode, the Giralda in Seville, that's also an Almohad construction in a sympathetic style. Now, next to it, you can see where the first Almohad mosque was built. Yeah, it's kind of funny, actually. We're not 100% what happened. A popular narrative goes that midway through construction, it was determined its Qibla was a few degrees off, so they started again next door, but also kept the first one as well. So, well, hey, we have two mosques now. So I guess we'll kind of make them contrasting, and nope, they are constructed to be virtually identical. So, yeah, surprising to no one, the first mosque fell out of use, and there's still an ornamental gate standing on the far side, but that's about it. So yeah, a bit of a mish building two mosques, but, well, at least we finally ended up with the correct Whoops, wait, no, the second mosque is even further out of alignment than the first one. No, really. But look, hey, beautiful mosque. We were enjoying the atmosphere in the square, but we hadn't really eaten so far that day. This was partly from an abundance of caution. The advice going in was to vet your choice of restaurants very carefully to check that the hygiene was passable. So we headed for a clump of restaurants, whereupon I promptly did exactly what I told myself and my friends we wouldn't do, and chose a restaurant without first checking its TripAdvisor rating, to make sure it wasn't in the habit of making cocktails from abattoir runoff or anything. But look, hey, this meal was incredible. No one got sick, no one had to sit in the toilet for hours. This was the first hint that maybe the dire warnings about Marrakech had been somewhat exaggerated. We had a lovely tagine and a selection of other things. By the way, tagine is the name of the cooking implement, not the recipe. It's essentially a slow cooker for all kinds of interesting stuff, often lamb, and in this case with figs and walnuts for that sort of sweet, savoury combination. It's revelatory. Big fan of this. And even though it was right by one of the most dense tourist areas with a roof terrace overlooking the mosque, I think it worked out about a £5 each, including drinks. Yeah, did I mention that Morocco is also crazy cheap? So, feeling a bit more nourished, we headed south to this. That's a good gate. This is the Bab Agnau gate. Oh, by the way, Bab means gate. So that was a tautology. This is some more Almohad architecture, and it quite comfortably takes the trophy as the most spectacular gate in the city. So through there, and you're face to face with the Mosque of Moulay Al-Yazid, also known as the Kasbah Mosque. More Almohad construction. You can see the callback to the Koutalbia, but still pretty spectacular. I don't think I mentioned, by the way, non-Muslims are not permitted to enter any of the mosques in the city, which is a shame, but understandable. These are still major centres of worship. They aren't just historical monuments. Down the side of the mosque are the Sardian tombs. It's 70 dirhams in. That's just over a £5. I was enjoying the art and the grandeur of it all. I had glanced past some reviews saying it wasn't worth the entrance fee and the queues were ridiculous, but I just assumed that was a few people being grouchy on a hot day. 70 dirham, that doesn't seem overly unreasonable. Even if it is a bit on the small side. But the queue was the real problem. I didn't keep a timer, but it was over 40 minutes to get to the front. With the four of us, we could kind of queue smart and take it in turns to queue while the other two had a look around. But yeah, thanks to the narrow passageway to the main chamber, this is a mess. So yeah, no one wins with a queue like that. Maybe you dodge that by getting there at 9 in the morning. I don't know. If you're not too busy, I guess you could stand in line. But I was getting particularly twitchy because it was approaching 5 p.m. and I wasn't sure what time some of the other sites we wanted to see would be closing. We headed across the road to get a quick coffee, and this place seemed as good as any. It wasn't a great cup of coffee, to be honest. Not appalling, but a little bit burnt, nothing to get excited about, just something to tide you over. But hey, not to worry, we still had 2 more days to find the good coffee. I mean, Marrakech has got to be packed full of beautiful little coffee places, right? So, it's 4:45. Just around the corner from the Casbah Mosque is the El Badi Palace, which closes at 5. Okay, well, not to worry, round the corner from that is the Bahia Palace, which also closes at 5. So I had a little bit of a rage. Our Saturday was already full and our Sunday morning was going to be very tight, so I was wondering if we'd missed the chance to see some of the main sights in the city. In a bit of a sulk, I took us to the nearby Dar Si Sad, which I'd heard was pretty nice to walk around, and thank goodness it didn't close till 6. And only about 30 dirham in. Okay, that's cool. And whoa, okay, seriously. So to backtrack, this is technically a textiles museum. Now, I know all you costume designers just started paying attention. Well, a textile museum wouldn't normally be my top priority, but no, this is so much more. The textiles definitely play second fiddle to the building itself. It's a bit like using Winchester Cathedral to exhibit a collection of bottle caps. I mean, you can if you like, but it's not what people are going to end up looking at. Yeah, this chilled me right out. It's a really good spot for all of you filthy Instagrammers out there. Oh, related note, please follow us on Instagram. We've only just joined, about 1 billion seconds late to the party. So yeah, this was a real treat, a proper slice of Marrakech culture. And the design is also joyous. It has this exuberance of someone who started drawing but then just never stopped. There's ornamental ceilings all over the place, a beautiful garden in the middle, and this model as just another example of the impossible beauty standards that women are held to. There were attendants closing doors behind us as we went through, so it was cutting it fine, but I was so glad we got to catch this in time. At nearly 6 o'clock, the sun was going down, and it was time to make our way to the accommodation. So a lot has been made of the labyrinthine streets of Marrakech and how easily you can get lost. And yeah, this is something to just enjoy and kind of vibe with. But it's not that hard. Download a map onto your phone that's available offline. Did pretty great for us. And then just look where the flow of people is coming from. I mean, the main confusion arises that a lot of the side streets essentially don't go anywhere or connect with anything much, but there won't be many people walking out of the dead end, so just keep an eye on the flow of people and mopeds, and oh my goodness, so many mopeds. Rather than smelling like exotic spice from the mystical Orient, the abiding smell in Marrakech is petrol. And while I know these streets are narrow, it's pretty bonkers to see someone just ride their moped right into a crowd of people. It's completely berserk. If they're prepared to barge through confined spaces like this, it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't even bother to dismount their mopeds after they got through their own front door. You know, just ride it up the stairs to kiss the kids goodnight. So yeah, passing through a lot of stalls with raw meat just hanging a few inches from the moped fumes, some piles of rubbish, some less than entirely trustworthy enterprises. It's pretty raw, but it is what it is, and it's very different from the UK, which is, you know, the whole point of being here. Eventually, actual pavements became a thing again, and we exited the city. Scampered across the ring road, crossed this riverbed, which seemed to have scarcely seen a droplet of water in its entire life, and to our accommodation. It turned out it was inside this gated suburb, which is, you know, extends quite a way. It's got its own shop and a pretty ornate mosque at the centre. Our flat was funny. On the one hand, it was really impressive. Compared to the square footage you get in the UK, this seems downright oligarchical. And this was all just for 80 quid for 4 of us for 2 nights. There were 4-poster beds, en-suites, even a roof terrace, and that Moroccan level of detail again. So that was pretty cool. On the other hand, we had gone deliberately cheap, and yeah, we weren't all that surprised when things started turning up as wrong. The Wi-Fi was down, there was a bathroom that leaked, so we had to move rooms, no towels, and we had to go out and get toilet paper ourselves. I mean, I don't know, I still quite liked it. Since we were only there for 48 hours, or well actually 41 now, it wasn't too much of a worry. The roof terrace was really nice to see the dusk setting over the rooftops. Pretty exhausted from the day, we had a stupidly cheap pizza from this cafe. I couldn't drop off for hours that night for some reason, but I set an early alarm for the next day because we had places to be. So up for 7 a.m, and it was genuinely chilly. We are headed out of the city and our ride was due at 7:30. So much as seeing Marrakech was a thrill, there is a secondary objective I wanted to hit. But I'm going to take a time jump here. You see, this second day really works as a standalone episode in and of itself. So instead, we're going to cut to day 3 and our final few hours and the rest of the Marrakech stuff. I know, look at me, all Christopher Nolan with all this non-linear storytelling. Maybe I could just play the remainder of the footage backwards. So it's the morning of day 3. The ominous red timer is getting low. I got up early and wandered around the streets alone. Encountered zero hassle, a few people wishing me a good morning, that's it. Once again, really not the fraught with hazards Marrakech that some other blog entries will have you believe. Or maybe I just look too scruffy to bother mugging. You know, whatever. Had a nice chance to catch a few pickups, a failed attempt to get shots of a very specific Easter egg, the Almoravid Kauba, which is going to have to be a tale for another time when I can actually film it properly. Sequel bait. After I got back to grab the others, we headed out about 9 a.m. with just a couple of hours to tick off some last objectives. We walked for about 40 minutes in the morning sun till we got here to the Bahia Palace. This was lovely. The footage speaks for itself. We were kind of rushing it, not unlike the way I'm kind of rushing the end of this video. If I were to make a side-by-side comparison, I was actually more enamoured with the Darcy Sad, though it is a little smaller. But look, 40 dirham cheaper, I mean, probably go see both. But if you've got to pick, maybe go see Darcy Sad. With very little spare time left, I left my friends at a coffee spot while I literally ran through the El Bardi Palace. Now, this is quite different to the others you've seen. This one was built by the Sardians in the 1500s and would have been extremely lavish, but it was deliberately levelled to the ground by their successors who carried off much of the masonry to build a palace in Meknes. As a result, this is mostly an outer wall, a rather bare central courtyard and a few features. It's kind of different. Perhaps unfair to compare it with the Bahia, although the entrance fee was about the same, which, you know, only a few quid. The really comical thing here are the storks. The storks are hilarious. They are such piss takers. We'd seen these huge nests on pretty much any tall structure you could think of, just dumping about a cubic metre of twigs onto it, and then they just sit there staring at you implacably. So yeah, breezed round the El Bardi. Again, definitely see it if you have time. Quick coffee at Earth Cafe, which is a vegan spot. I had thought that of all the places, this might have had more care put into it, but no, it was still quite resolutely mediocre. Like, not terrible, just not that great either. We then had to get to the airport, and we decided we'd probably better get a cab. So it was like, okay, we've been avoiding bartering, but we might have a bit of an argument on our hands while these guys try and scam us. So the first one pulls up. 150 dirham, the guy said with a smile. Oh. Okay, that's surprisingly reasonable, actually. So I was a bit disarmed by that. Cool. Okay, off to the airport then. So, yeah, after all that, thank you for a calm, non-stressful cab ride. Did not see that coming. Look, thanks for putting me on edge, guys. Back at the airport, there are a few hoops to jump through that you need to be aware of, so just read the instructions carefully before you get there. There's a bag scan on the way in, but it's pretty surface level. Then due to laws, I don't know, you can't just waltz to the security desk. You first need to go to your airline's baggage drop, and even if you don't have hold luggage, you still have to get this stamp on your tickets. You then go through security, then passport control, and finally you're in the departure lounge. So while you do need some time for all of this, it was probably about 30, maybe 40 minutes to get it all done. A quick bite with the last of our dirhams, another bag check, but as it happened, they pretty much just waved us through, and a bit of a wait in the tunnel, and we are back on the plane. 48 hours done, stop the clock. So yes, that's Marrakech. It's probably one of the most exciting and different places we've been yet, and yes, way less threatening than all the blogs and videos would have you believe. Just take a look through some of the cultural things, go with a bunch of mates, and be a little bit alert to your surroundings, and chances are almost all of the people you interact with will be absolutely lovely. I'm going to wrap up my Marrakech thoughts at the back half of the next episode, where we fill in that time gap as we travel into the mountains, from snow to the desert and sea. Well, we'll fill you in on that one next time. In the meantime, the music in the background is part of the Marrakech EP. Every episode we make, we compose the music in the background, and it's available on bandcamp.com. If you want to support the channel, that's the place to do it. See you guys on the next episode.